there, Jody here, and welcome back to my channel. And if you're new here on my channel, sometimes I talk about Broadway, sometimes I talk about television, and sometimes I talk about books. And in today's video, I'm going to be talking about Broadway, which is something on my channel that I don't talk about as often as I talk about books and television. And that's because, in one way, it's difficult to talk about because Broadway used to be such a big part of my life. For about 20 years. I talked about this before on my channel before. I guess this video is kind of like a sequel to where I talked about really missing Broadway. I guess you could refer to this video as the sequel to that video. I made that video pretty much when I started my channel, and I also talked about Broadway when I started a Broadway show series where I started to talk about all the Broadway shows that I've seen over the years. I, at some point took a pause on that series, primarily because my playbills were out of order and I was too lazy at the time to put them in order, and, I still haven't dealt with that. So that's kind of why I took a pause in the Broadway show series as well. And I guess I just felt like making this video today where I talk about really missing Broadway, really missing theater, because we're in the season of Tony Awards. And, this used to be such a joyful time for me, because I got to see Broadway shows, and I used to love the Tony Awards and predicting what I think would win and, who I thought would win, because it was just so much fun. Theater wasn't just like a hobby of mine. It was really like a friend, if you will. At some point, like after high school, friendships kind of ceased to exist for me. Maybe one day I'll talk about all that. It's another very difficult topic to talk about. But yeah, Broadway was kind of like there for me, I guess you could say, when people weren't. And for about 20 years, it was like a constant friend. It was probably the longest friend I ever had. Broadway still exists, theater still exists, but things in my life kind of just changed the last few years, where seeing Broadway shows on a regular basis like I was became something that no longer really existed for me. And before I get any more into the video, I just want to point a few things out that I know some people might say. That theater and Broadway are not the most important things in the world. I am fully aware of that. That theater is very expensive. I'm also aware of that. The thing for me is, in life, you have to have something that gives your life some kind of meaning, some kind of joy, some kind of reason to make life fun. And that was what Broadway was for me. I really enjoyed it. It was my favorite thing in the world was to go into New York and see a show and just get away from reality for a few hours. I stopped having friends at a certain point in my life. Let's just say I didn't pick the best people to be friends with, and, that had a real toll on my confidence as I got older. And, as you get older, it's very hard to make new friends and have really good friendships. It's just more difficult. I also, at some point, really started struggling with depression and anxiety, like health issues with my stomach and OCD. And, the years that I was supposed to be finding myself and figuring out who I wanted to be, my stomach and my OCD really took over my life. Even though those things are still there in my life, maybe not to the capacity that they once were, I always found it such a miracle in a sense that I was even able to make it into the city for a few hours and see a show, knowing just the amount of anxiety that I struggle with. And, I just love Broadway and I really miss it. The Tony Awards this year are coming up in a few weeks, and I haven't really watched the Tony Awards since about 2021, because that was the last season that I saw any shows, like the 2019-2020 season, I guess you could say. That was the last time I saw any shows. So since then, over the years, I've recorded, the Tony Awards, and I just never watched them. This year, though, I think there's a chance that I might watch them, just because I got to a point when, maybe I'm just ready to realize that theater probably isn't a part of my life like it once was, and maybe I guess I've accepted it more, and it's easier to, see stuff that like Broadway shows performing on TV and not be super depressed that, I'm not going to get to see them and I might really like the shows, what they're performing and what I see. And unless you really like theater and Broadway and you don't have a lot of people in your life and friends, maybe this is something you can't relate to, but theater really was like something that was really there for me, like I said, when people weren't. So this might feel like a silly video to some, but hopefully someone out there gets what I'm saying. I think the show Titanic was what helped me, finally change my feelings on finally watching the Tony Awards again, because I really want to see that show, and I'm not going to get to see it more than likely. But it just looks so funny, and I just know in a different timeline, I would have probably seen that show in previews and then a bunch of times afterwards. Plus, the St. James is like my favorite theater, and in my opinion, the best theater on Broadway. So I would have loved to, go to see the show for that reason alone. But yeah, I think that show helped turn it around for me because I really want to see that show, and I don't want to miss out on at least seeing them perform at the Tony Awards. And yeah, I definitely plan on making my predictions for what shows might win and what performers might win at this year's Tony Awards. Funny if I actually was correct on all my predictions whenever I do make that video, seeing as I'm someone who didn't get to see any shows this season, or, But yeah, I just thought, I make this video and let out my sadness a little bit about how theater is no longer a part of my life. The sequel. Because like I said, this is kind of like a sequel video where I guess I've kind of accepted that theater and Broadway aren't a part of my life anymore, and I'm not expecting them to be. Just like I said, things in my life changed, and it's kind of like not possible to see shows in the way I once did. So yeah, I guess I accepted that more. Theater is expensive. I totally agree with that. It's too expensive. But theater to me is more than just a ticket price. It was a place to have fun, get away from reality, sit down, watch some great performances, and, just have fun. And that was fun for me. So I don't really know how to end this video, so I guess I'll just say, let me know in the comments what was your favorite Broadway show of this theater season, or what's your favorite Broadway show of all time. Thank you so very much for watching and for listening. And until next time, bye.